The sand is still warm beneath your feet. The sky above Giza is the kind of blue that doesn't apologize for anything. Vast, indifferent, ancient. You're standing at the base of the Great Pyramid, neck craned back, staring up at something that has no right to exist. 2,300,000 blocks of stone. Some of them weigh more than an elephant. They were cut, transported, lifted, and stacked with a precision that modern engineers still struggle to fully explain. And they were built without cranes, without steel, without computers, without wheels in the traditional sense, and without a single written instruction manual that has ever been found. The official story says this was a tomb, a monument to ego, a king's vanity project carved into the desert by loyal workers who believed their pharaoh was a god. But the more carefully you look at the evidence, the skeletal remains, the administrative records, the internal architecture, the astronomical alignments, the complete absence of a royal mummy inside any of the major pyramids, the more that story starts to crack. And what's underneath it is far more disturbing, far more human, and far stranger than anything Hollywood has ever shown you. Start with what you think you know. You've seen the images 1,000 times, enslaved people dragging stone blocks under a merciless sun, while an overseer with a whip keeps them in line. That image has been so repeated, so embedded in popular imagination, that most people treat it as historical fact. It isn't. The archaeological record tells a completely different story, and in some ways, a more unsettling one. In the 1990s, excavations led by Zahi Hawass uncovered an entire city of workers just south of the Giza Plateau. Bakeries, breweries, medical facilities, mass graves. The workers who built the pyramids weren't enslaved foreigners. They were Egyptians. They were organized into named gangs. They received wages in food, beer, and medical care. Their bones show healed fractures, injuries that someone bothered to treat. And yet, when you look at those same bones closely, when you read what the physical evidence actually says, the story stops being reassuring almost immediately. Those healed fractures tell you something specific. They tell you that these people were injured regularly, badly, and repeatedly. The skeletons found at Giza show compressed spines, arthritic knees, worn-down joints consistent with a lifetime of hauling loads that no human body was designed to carry. These were not people who chose this work the way you choose a career. The state of Egypt conscripted labor through a system called the corvée, a mandatory rotation of work owed to the pharaoh by common citizens. You didn't volunteer. Your village was assigned a quota. You showed up, or your community faced consequences. You were fed and housed, yes, but your body was not your own. And here is the part that almost never gets said out loud. The pyramids weren't just built for the dead. They were built to control the living. Think about what it takes to organize a project of this scale. Archaeologists have estimated that the Great Pyramid required a sustained workforce of somewhere between 20,000 and 30,000 people at any given time, with a rotating population of tens of thousands more involved in logistics, supply chains, and administration. To feed that many people required vast agricultural networks. To house them required construction and planning at a scale previously unseen in human history. To coordinate them required a bureaucratic apparatus, scribes, overseers, engineers, accountants, that tied together an entire civilization's resources. Building the pyramid wasn't a side project, it was the project. Everything else in Old Kingdom Egypt organized itself around it. The harvest schedules, the flood cycles of the Nile, the taxation system, the religious calendar. The pyramid was the beating heart of a state machine, and that machine needed to justify its own existence to survive. This is where the disturbing truth starts to take shape. Because when you ask why the pyramids were really built, not what they say on the surface, but what function they actually served in Egyptian society, the answer isn't really about death. It's about power. It's about how a small group of people at the top of a civilization managed to convince hundreds of thousands of ordinary men and women to sacrifice their bodies and their time, and sometimes their lives, for a structure that would serve a dead man's afterlife. And the mechanism they used wasn't purely force. It was something far more sophisticated and far harder to resist. It was theology turned into infrastructure. The pharaoh was not just a king in the modern sense. He was a god made flesh. Specifically, he was the living embodiment of Horus, the falcon deity, and at death he became Osiris, the king of the dead. The pyramid wasn't a monument to his memory. It was a machine for his resurrection, a literal cosmic engine designed to launch his soul into the stars and ensure that the divine order of the universe continued uninterrupted. And here is the critical piece. If the pharaoh failed to achieve resurrection, the entire universe was at risk. The floods of the Nile might stop coming. The harvests might fail. The sun might not rise. The common Egyptian worker wasn't building a tomb for a dead king. He was participating in the maintenance of reality itself. That's not a metaphor. That was the sincere belief of the people swinging those copper tools in the heat. You were not working for a man. You were working for the continuation of the world. Now sit inside that belief for a moment. You're a farmer from a village 3 days' walk from Giza. You've been conscripted for your rotation. You arrive at a site that is already incomprehensible in its scale. You see stone being cut with a precision that seems impossible. You see thousands of men moving in organized rhythms like something alive and purposeful. You see priests performing rituals at every stage of construction. You hear the name of the pharaoh invoked in prayers and chants throughout the day, and you believe, genuinely, viscerally, with the same certainty that you believe the sun will rise tomorrow, that what you are doing here is preventing the collapse of existence. How hard do you work under those conditions? How much pain do you absorb without complaint? The theology didn't just justify the pyramid. It was the fuel that built it. But the theology alone wasn't enough, because even sincere belief has limits when your back is breaking and your hands are bleeding and the limestone dust is filling your lungs every single day. So the state created an additional layer of incentive that was both generous and deeply calculated. The workers at Giza received rations of bread, beer, fish and meat at a quality and quantity significantly above what most Egyptian peasants ate in their daily lives. Medical care was provided. Injuries were treated. The mass graves found near the worker village show signs of what appears to be organized burial, ritual care for the dead. These were not people being thrown away. They were being maintained, managed, and in a very specific sense, compensated. And that compensation created loyalty, or at least compliance, far more efficiently than whips ever could. You were being fed better than you'd ever been fed in your village. You were part of something vast. And when you died at the site, as many did, you were buried near the pyramid itself, close to the divine. In death, proximity to the pharaoh's resurrection machine was its own reward. The internal architecture of the Great Pyramid makes this machinery even stranger. For decades, Egyptologists have puzzled over the shafts that cut diagonally through the pyramid's core, narrow passages pointing towards specific stars, including Orion's belt and the star Thuban, which served as the pole star in the age when Khufu ruled. These weren't ventilation shafts. They were trajectories. They were the paths down which the pharaoh's soul was meant to travel after death, ascending into the sky to join the eternal stars that never set below the horizon. The entire structure was built as a cosmic address, a precise coordinate in the universe for a god to return home. Every angle, every alignment, every weight-bearing calculation served this single astronomical and theological purpose. The pyramid was not a tomb in the way we understand tombs. It was a launch pad, which brings you to one of the most uncomfortable facts about the Great Pyramid specifically. It was almost certainly never used for its stated purpose. No pharaoh's mummy has ever been found inside the Great Pyramid. No funerary equipment. No sarcophagus lid. The so-called King's Chamber holds a coffer of red granite that shows no trace of ever having contained a body. Whether Khufu was buried there and the tomb was robbed in antiquity, or whether the pyramid served a purpose that was never purely funerary, remains a genuine open question among archaeologists. What is clear is that the civilization spent everything it had building these structures, wealth, labor, time, resources, human bodies, for a return that was entirely metaphysical. There was no practical reward, no defensive advantage, no agricultural gain. The pyramid produced nothing you could eat, drink, or use to survive. It produced meaning, and meaning, it turns out, was the most powerful resource in the ancient world. Consider what that means for the workers whose bodies gave out on that plateau, the man whose spine was compressed into permanent curvature by decades of hauling limestone, the woman, yes, women were found among the workers, whose arthritic hands document a life of physical labor beyond what most modern people will ever experience. They didn't build the pyramid because someone forced them at sword point. They built it because they lived inside a worldview in which the pyramid was the most important thing in existence. The state did not need to enslave them. It needed only to make them believe. And it did that with extraordinary efficiency, through ritual, through theology, through material reward, through the sheer overwhelming spectacle of the construction itself. You show someone a structure that appears to be too large for any human to have built, and then you tell them it was built for a god, and then you invite them to be part of it, and something very old in the human brain says yes. That is the disturbing truth. Not that the pyramids were built by slaves who suffered in silence, but that they were built by people who suffered willingly, because a system of belief had been constructed with such precision and depth that their suffering felt sacred. The pharaoh was not a tyrant standing apart from the project. He was the theological justification for the entire apparatus. Without the belief in his divinity, not one stone gets moved. Without the meaning encoded in that rising shape on the horizon, there is no workforce. The pyramid is not a monument to royal ego. It is the physical proof of what human beings will endure and what they will build when they are made to believe that the survival of everything depends on it. And here is the part that should follow you out of this video and into your regular life. Tonight, you will sleep in a bed without a compressed spine. Tomorrow, you will eat food that didn't take years off your life to produce. You will take something for a headache without wondering if the sun will rise. You will never be conscripted by a state apparatus and told that the universe depends on your willingness to destroy your body over the course of a decade. These are not small things. These are the distance between you and the man whose healed fractures were excavated from the sand at Giza. A man who worked in the shadow of a god, who believed every aching day of it, and whose bones are the only honest record we have of what the pyramids actually cost. The official story calls this a burial monument. The workers' skeletons call it something else entirely. If there's a place, a civilization, a ritual, a royal court, or a moment in history that you want to see, stripped of its myth and rebuilt from the bones up, drop it in the comments. The version you've been told is almost never the whole story.